Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to Ascend Women in Leadership series featuring Andrea Leszek. I am so excited for our conversation today. Andrea is the COO of technology at Salesforce. She has, over the past 20 years, climbed up the ranks at Salesforce, achieved a lot, overcome a lot of challenges. She is also a founding member of Salesforce's Women's Network. And today, Andrea's going to share with us about how she reacted when her boss told her that her work wasn't as valuable as it should be, and she knew that wasn't the right case. What she did when she held herself back from moving up, and all the other topics that we really struggle with. Hi, everyone. I'm Shivani. I am the CEO and founder of Ascend. We offer an online leadership program for women. What really inspired me to start Ascend was I used to be in your shoes. As I was moving up into management, I learned how to be a better leader, all by making a ton of mistakes. Some guidance, probably just a lot of mistakes. So I wanted to create the leadership program that I wish I had access to when making that transition. Our mission at Ascend is to elevate more women into leadership. That's a big way we create the change that we need to see in today's workplaces. And we're doing it. We have women from Salesforce, Slack, Google, Peloton, DoorDash, and so many more companies coming out of the program feeling more confident, being able to get teams excited about their ideas, and moving up faster in their careers, including getting promoted. So much of our program is curated by senior leaders who have been in your shoes and know the real challenges that you face. I really think we need to have more open and honest conversations around what it takes to be successful as a manager. What are the day-to-day challenges that we struggle with? And that's why we host these fireside chats. So you get to hear firsthand from people who have done it, who have the battle scars, who have succeeded, and how to go do it. And that's why I'm so excited here to talk with Andrea. Andrea, thank you for joining us. And you know what's really amazing? We've already had a moment of connection and realness. So when Andrea and I were prepping for today's conversation, she admitted that she gets really nervous around public speaking. And so she's like, to try to get over that, I say yes to speaking engagements, but I always regret saying yes as I get closer to the date. And, you know, when she said that, I was, one, to be honest, really surprised, because Andrea and I were on a panel together at the Salesforce conference last year, and I found her to be incredibly articulate and insightful. And then, but I was pleasantly surprised because I'm also feeling nervous right now. So it's helpful to hear like, okay, well, if you're feeling nervous, that actually makes me feel less nervous. And more so.
Yeah, I do get nervous. It's just like that, like, you know, the monkey brain that's like, oh my God, well, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I'm not interesting? What if no one cares what I have to say? And it's funny. And so I do make a habit of saying yes as much as I can when people ask me, just to kind of push myself to go. But I do always have a moment of regret. And I'll tell you, when I woke up this morning, my first thought was, oh gosh, I wonder, is it too late to cancel? Because I was just like feeling so nervous. Obviously, I wasn't going to cancel, Shivani, but
No, I know, I trust it. No, thank you so much for sharing that. You know, that's actually, when you shared that, that actually made me even more excited to have you, because even right now, how you're opening up, because that's exactly the same thought process that goes into my mind. I'm like, oh, can we move this? Like, okay, I don't know. I wish this wasn't happening. And then when I get into it, it's so fun and so like enlightening. And the fact that you can be real with us and share what's going through your mind while having this really, and especially coming from you, who is extremely senior, has very impressive background, which is why it made me more excited. And so if you like, you know, for all of you listening in right now, if you are even more pumped to hear from Andrea's experiences right now, put a yes in the chat. Let's hype her up and cheer her on. Like, thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability. Yes, definitely more pumped. Yes. You're getting a lot of love in the chat. Everyone's excited to hear from you. And thank you so much for opening up already to us. Absolutely love and respect this kind of honesty. Me too. Amazing. Well, Andrea, you're an inspiration. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks.
And today, so Andrea and I are going to chat for about 30 minutes around a lot of the topics that are on all of our minds. And then we're going to take questions from you. So throughout the conversation, you can drop any questions in the bottom right of your Zoom screen, the Q&A icon. You can drop questions and upvote anything, and then we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. We also want this conversation to be really fun and valuable for you. So if something resonates with you in the chat, then something resonates and drop that in the chat. And reminder, when you're dropping things in the chat, toggle over to everyone instead of host and panelists, because that's the Zoom default setting. So you need to change the Zoom chat setting to everyone to make sure everyone sees what you're sharing. So Andrea, let's just dive in. I'd love to hear more about your career experience. Is there an inflection point or a moment in your life that really changed your career trajectory?
Absolutely. There's been many. And I think the biggest one was the inflection point that propelled me to Salesforce. And so long story short, I was working as a technical writer when I first came to the Bay Area and got started in tech. And so I was working at a small software company in Emeryville. I won't name the name, but I was doing a great job. I got great reviews, etc. And I wanted a raise. And so I did my research. At that time, there was kind of this annual report of technical writer salaries. This was before you could just Google it. And so I was like, I'm not making as much as like the average person with my experience. So I went to my boss and I said, I'd like a raise. And, here's the great things I've done. Here's the data on what, average salary for my position. And my boss was like, okay, you are doing a great job. Let me go talk to my boss. And so she did, and she came back and the answer was no. The answer was, we just don't think that technical writers and the work that you're doing is worth that much. And I was flabbergasted. But it made me realize that this company was never going to value what I did. Like, they had the hard data in front of them, what other companies were paying for what I did at my years of experience. And they just flat out, they literally said, we don't think it's worth it. And so, I think that no was the best answer I ever got, because it pushed me out of my comfort zone. And I went looking for another job, and kind of stumbled upon a college friend in the street who said, I'm at a little software company and we're looking for someone to come and manage our documentation and write it. And that little company was salesforce.com. And so I went and I had my interview. I interviewed with Mark Benioff because the company was only like 60, 70 people at the time. And I was just so excited to get this job. And when I went back to my exit interview at my other company, the HR person was like, well, do you mind telling me how much your salary is? And my new salary was more than what I had asked for. And so her mouth just dropped open. And it wasn't like I was rolling in the big bucks, I wasn't about to go out and buy, a mansion in Pacific Heights, but it was what I was worth. And I it's not to sound like greedy or material, but like, you put so much effort into your job, you should get paid what you're worth and what your value is. So that no was the best answer they ever gave me, because it got me here to Salesforce. And that was a huge inflection point for my career.
I love that story. I think so. It's scary to take that leap and be like, no, I'm going to go somewhere else. And, we always talk about standing up for yourself and just taking what you deserve, but that's scary. So thank you so much for sharing that. And what a great outcome. And even, yeah, I think such an inspiring story. I see in the chat, I think people are like so pumped up because so many of us have been in that situation before. And you're a really great role model for showing like how you can actually go do it. I think, and that's like a really great story of like how you have seeked out and like kind of pushed for what you deserve. In Ascenders, our members often talk about that they're scared of sharing their ideas or asking for things because they're afraid of the no, or they think they won't be good at it. I'm curious, has that ever happened to you? Like, in this situation you just shared, you seize the moment, which is so admirable. But I'm curious, have you ever held yourself back?
Definitely. Yeah. I you know, like a lot of folks, struggle with, can I do this? Can I not do this? Do I have all the qualifications? And so there was a time at Salesforce when kind of there was an opportunity for kind of a restructuring of groups because my peer had left and her teams were kind of up for grabs. My boss had left. So there was just some restructuring going on. And my boss's boss was open to hearing kind of people's ideas about it, which is great. That's always a great quality in a boss, to hear from people before they make a decision. And so I went to him and I had a pitch and I said, I can definitely do, team A and team B and team C. Like I can lead those, but team D, I just don't think that I have the experience or can do that one. And he was like, okay. Thanks for sharing that. I'll let you know once I've made a decision. And then the next day I went to one of my peers who was a great support. You should always surround yourself with a network of supporters, mentors. And so I told her what I told him. And she's like, Andrea, you're crazy. Of course you can do that other team. She's like, if not you, then who? And I was like, and I'm thinking, oh, well, you're right. Like, I probably am the best qualified to take on that team. So I actually went back to that skip level boss and said, I changed my mind. I can definitely do that other team. And here's why I think I can do it. And I also told him, like, here's the areas where I think, I'll need a little bit of help. And he ended up giving me all of those teams that I had asked for, including the one that I felt a little uncertain about. But I think sometimes we just hold ourselves back too much, right? And having that little push from, whether it's a partner at home or like your work partner, your mentor, whoever can help you, you need that.
Yeah, having that support system, that personal board of directors is so helpful around it. And like, is there, do you still maintain that today? Like, how do you cultivate that sounding board of like getting people to help you get out of your own head?
That is a great question. And I do feel it's a little bit harder now that we're mostly working remotely. It feels a little bit harder to, just kind of get a quick chat here or there. But I do try to kind of set up short Zoom calls or do a walk with somebody if I can meet them in person, to try to maintain that network and that support system. So, but you have to like kind of push yourself out of the comfort zone to do that, right?
Yeah. And I'm curious if you've had the same experience, but I found that usually when I reach out to people and ask for that advice or that support, like people are happy to help. And it's more about like that narrative that like the story I'm telling myself. I'm like, oh, they're not going to want to, or I don't want to burden them with it. And actually, I found like most people actually get joy out of it as long as you're doing it in a respectful manner and you're doing good work. So they're like, yeah, this person's good. Like I want to help them succeed.
Yeah. I did well, just to just to add on to that a little bit, I do find most people are really happy to do it, happy to give you time. I did have a mentee once who would not show up for our meetings, and she'd be like, oh, it wasn't on my calendar. And I'd be like, but you set the meeting up. So so after a while, I just was like, I can't do this with you because you're not respecting my time. So, if you're going to have those networking meetings, be with a mentor, you have to really respect their time, show up on time, come prepared, all that stuff.
For sure. Wow, she was lucky to have you as a mentor. Missed opportunity. But you're right. Like you have to like, and I always say to people when people ask me about developing mentors, I'm like, you have to overinvest. Like go 200%. If that person is like helping you, like show up for them and like overly do it to show your gratitude around it. So that's some really helpful advice. I'd love to dive into your leadership experience. You are clearly someone who's been incredibly successful at Salesforce. Everyone that I know who has worked with you just like has the most amazing things to say about you as a leader. So I'm curious, like, how would your team describe you as a leader?
It's so funny you kind of gave me this question ahead of time to think about, and it's hard for me to kind of answer that. And it's funny, we have this thing, we have a survey feedback on our leadership, and so I went and I checked on my most recent survey data, and some of the things that folks have said that I'm very focused and rigorous about priorities, growth mindset approach. I do feel like, we can all keep learning and growing, curious and open-minded, fair, a champion for the team, and willing to talk through anything. So those are some of the great things that my team has said about me. One of the other thing that I need to work on is definitely around, they want me to share more of my mistakes and failures and be able to learn from that. And you had asked me in our pre-chat, like, what's one mistake or what's a big failure I had? And I had a hard time thinking of one. And I think it's because I don't really think about things as failures if I'm able to learn from them. So when I look back on what might be failures, I only remember the learning. I don't remember the failure. But anyway, that's one of the things that I probably need to get better at, because other people can learn from my failures if I talk about them,
Yeah. I mean, you're already starting, not to say that being nervous about public speaking is a failure at all, but like, it's something that, that is an area of improvement. And so like, you've already started sharing with us. And so I think you're off to a good start, it feels like. And I agree with you on that. I also think about failures as growth opportunities. I'm like, yeah, that sucked, that happened. Okay, but like, at least now I know for the future. And like, I tend to learn faster by making mistakes than just like kind of doing normally. And that's actually why we're even here right now, because I only started Ascend because I made so many mistakes as I was moving up to management. I was like, okay, other people don't have to make these same mistakes. I'm just gonna create something that you can learn this up front. So that really, really resonates with me. And I'd love to hear, as you're talking about your leadership brand, our brand is essentially our reputation at work. And, you clearly are very well respected. People like working with you. And that's something that like, I get a question around a lot, like, how can I be deliberate about building up my brand? So is any advice that you have for us, a couple actions that we could take to how you built up your brand, or how should we be thinking about it?
Yeah. When I try to be as authentic as I can, and do what I say I'm going to do, say what I'm going to do, care about the people around me, and recognize, good work that's happening. So I think, as a leader, or a new manager, which I think many of the folks who join your program are, one of the best things you can do for your brand is highlight the achievements of your team. Because your success is their success is your success. And it can feel uncomfortable to toot your own horn, but every manager should feel comfortable talking about the great things that their team has done, right? And your boss and your boss's bosses will see that, and it will reflect well on you. So I think that thinking about your team, and how you can highlight them is a great way to build your brand as a leader.
I love that. Like focusing on the contributions, like how's your team succeeded, but also how have you helped your team excel? And so it's not about like, hey, look at all these wins I have, but it's about the team. And in it becomes clear about what you've done too. That I really love that. And you know, one thing that as part of a leader, especially when you're managing so many teams and so much complexity, changing environments, it's really important to be able to motivate people. So I'm curious, like, what are some advice, like what has worked for you around motivating people to get people like moving towards the same direction and excited about it?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple different types of motivation, and my first story was money, which can be a motivator, right? I think like you need to be paying people what they're worth, so that type of thing, that type of question is off the table, and then you can move to the type of motivation that is more intrinsic, which is like, are people part of something that they believe in? Can they see what the vision is and where it's going? Are they with a company and a team that reflects their personal values? And then, just when you start to get down to the individuals on your team, like just get curious and ask them kind of what's important to them. You'll find some people really love public recognition. Some people do not want public recognition. We've definitely had people on the team who like, do not post anything about me. I'm happy if you just tell me privately. So, pay attention to the cues you're getting, but also don't be afraid to ask people like what motivates them. Whoops.
I love that. And I'm curious, like, what are some examples of questions that you might use to understand what motivates them?
That's a great question. We do these quarterly check-ins, and whatever cadence works for your company. We use once a release, or once a quarter, once a month, whatever works. Just questions around like, what have you achieved this past month, or this past quarter, that has made you proud? Or what are some things that get you excited about the projects that you're working on? And in the answers and follow-up questions, you'll start to hear like, is it a big vision that someone likes? Is it a recognition? Is it doing work where they can attach it to a higher purpose? I think just asking some of those questions and paying attention to the answers.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like a normal conversation, just asking them about it. But the hard part is you have to pay attention, which is not hard, but we need to be more aware around it. And, I imagine you can use these questions, whether you are a people manager asking your reports, but also asking your cross-functional partners, your peers, like senior stakeholders, because you don't have to be a people manager to be able to motivate people around you. It's all a part of, influencing and understanding what motivates them. And these questions are a great way to highlight that.
Yeah, it's a great point, because I have to do a lot of influencing of people outside of my organization. And, leaders have to do that all throughout their career. And that's one of the first questions I ask myself is like, what's important to this person? As I'm about to go to them to kind of negotiate or try to get their buy-in on something. And if I can understand what's important to them, it helps me to kind of figure out how I want to approach them in the conversation to start.
Yeah, that's such a good call out. And actually, yeah, let's focus on that for a little bit, because so in Ascend's leadership program, the main thing we focus on is how do you influence that work? Like, how do you get people excited about your ideas? How do you get buy-in on your recommendations? And one of the questions they get asked the most often is like, how do I figure out what motivates other people, especially if I like am meeting them for the first time, or if I don't have a lot of interactions with them? And I imagine, like, in your role as COO of a really large organization, you deal with this a lot. So what are some strategies that you use to understand what motivates people when you don't have a number of interactions with them, or when you're just starting to get to know them?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, um, I I try to practice mindfulness, and for me, mindfulness is not just about, kind of meditating in my garden, but it's about being present in the moment. And uh, part of that being present is really listening to the other person, because it can be so easy to be thinking in your head, okay, what's the next point I need to make, or like what's the next thing I need to do, instead of just really listening to the other person. um, and also, it's a little harder on Zoom, but like noticing like what the body language is, who's paying attention, who's not. And some of those cues can help you with um, kind of how the conversation is going. Like, are you making your point? Are you starting to influence them, or are they resistant? And that's, times when you can be like, you can also just name it. Like, I noticed that there's some hesitancy about this idea. Tell me, what more you'd like to see to make this a reality, or something like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important just to be able to call it out. So often I feel like we don't feel like we shouldn't call it out. And it's just like, actually, that's the right thing to do. And then you just open up, you acknowledge the elephant in the room, and then that actually helps you move forward around it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that. I see a question in the chat. And as any of you have questions, I'm loving like all the insights people are sharing in the chat and their experiences. If you have questions that you want Andrea to dig into, then drop them in the Q&A. So that's in the bottom right of your Zoom screen. You can add questions and drop any questions in. And Andrea, one quick question on with the theme of influencing and understanding motivators. What advice would you have for us when we're sometimes working with colleagues who are just being really difficult? So, you ask them the question like, here, I see that you're hesitant about it. Like, what would need to help us make this reality? And then they're like, oh, I don't know. Or they just like put the ball back in your court. Like, so, any advice for us? Like, how do we navigate those situations when people aren't giving us a lot to go on? They're just being difficult.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, I have had situations like that. One of the things I try to do is to get advice from other people who work with that person. Like, hey, I'm having difficulty with so and so. What, do you know what makes that person tick? Or do you know what's important to that person right now? Or do you know what's going on elsewhere that might be making this situation difficult? And I hope if that doesn't yield anything, try to find other people who can help influence that person, kind of get your posse to on your side to help you with your case. And I think if all else fails, sometimes just a sit down with a person of like, we're not making any progress here. Can we try to figure out like how to move this forward? Like, let's get real together. And then sometimes there are just people that you're not going to make headway with, and that's okay. You can move on to a different project, try to get someone else to work on you with it. You can't win them all.
That's so true. I think it's hard to always remember that, but you are such a good example of that. How you left your company when they weren't willing to compensate you for what you truly were like worth. Even here calling out like, okay, sometimes you can do everything in your power, but then it still cannot work. And I love that advice also around like just having to sit down with them. I find when I've had these tough situations, one-on-ones can be a really nice way to disarm the person. and just have this like face-to-face or Zoom video to video conversation,
Yeah.
and just kind of like digging into it without them having to like, without us having to deal with anyone else's opinions, and it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
let's just talk about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I see a lot of good questions coming through in the chat. And so the first one is around management. So how have you dealt with managing a report professionally and being fair when your personalities don't jive, or when you have different working styles? So you're managing someone and you two just operate differently. What advice, like how's that experience been for you? Or what advice would you have for us around this?
Yeah. I'll tell you, I think the key is finding what is brilliant about this person. Like, not everyone needs to be like you. And in fact, you want your team to have a diversity of styles and et cetera. I had someone who worked for me who I'm very data driven, very logical. Okay. And this person would come to me and she would say things like, I just feel we should do blah, blah, blah. Or I really feel like this decision is going to have a bad impact. And I'm like, I can't go on what you feel, like get me some data. But and she struggled to do that at the time. And so what I realized though is she was always right. When she had a feeling about something, it was going to happen. It was right. And so I came to appreciate her intuitiveness, her, her way of approaching a situation, which was very different than mine. So I don't know if that's helpful, but if you can find what is really brilliant about this person and build on that strength.
Yeah, I really like that. And I'd say also, just, is the different working styles bad? Like, is it actually like hurting progress on the project or helping to push things forward? Because sometimes you might just have a different approach and that's okay, as long as the end result is happening, as long as everyone feels like supported and respected.
Yeah.
So, we were talking about how do you motivate teams. I see a question around how do you motivate yourself, especially when, so the question is, we cannot do brilliant new work all the time. Sometimes the work is more to maintain or keep things running. How do you keep yourself motivated in such situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I so if I'm working on something that I don't find particularly interesting or motivating, I try to work on it with people that I find enjoyable to work with. So that's one thing is doing a collaboration with others that I enjoy working with. I mean, I guess another is just trying to find something about it that you can maybe innovate on. Can I make this routine thing just like 2% better by doing something slightly different? Or just thinking of ways maybe that you can innovate a little bit, even though it's like mundane routine stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, get creative around how to make that exciting. And I think that especially finding people that you enjoy working with is so key. At least for me, that has an outsized impact on how much I enjoy the work. And so if I'm able to like partner with someone who I find like intellectually challenges me, or like we can just like have fun together, build rapport, that helps me find meaning in my work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So last question for you is, we have a question around work-life balance. So I'd love to hear about how you manage to keep your work-life balance or work-life integration, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's great because I mean, clearly you have a very full plate. Extremely senior. And on top of, your COO responsibilities, you're also such a strong sponsor and active member of the Women's Network and involved in a bunch of other things. So yeah, how do you balance all these things? And like, what advice would you have for us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I find it helpful, to actually write down what your priorities are. and what's important to you. And then look at how you're spending your time. And are you spending your time on your priorities? So just like you do it at your job, right? You have a list of what your goals are. Do you have that for your whole life? And if, spending time with your kids or getting some exercise or, going on a date night once a week with a partner, or finding a partner, like if those are priorities for you, like how are you making time for them? And I love to calendar things. That's kind of one of the ways I do it. So that's what I'll do. I'll make sure that we have in the calendar, a trip for the family or exercise or other things. And I will be honest with you, it was so much harder when my daughter was little. She is a senior in high school now, and it's just getting easier all the time because she's so much more independent. So if you have little kids, give yourself a break. Don't feel like you have to, do everything under the sun. I mean, you can still have a great career and have little kids, but it is harder with little kids.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that. Again, real practical advice, like very just a lot of honesty there. I also started writing down my priorities, and it is very cathartic. Like just writing it out and just be like, hey, like these are the how I will like when I will say no to things or the trade-offs I will make. Just removes a lot of like stress in my mind.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. This, for those from Salesforce on the call, we have this thing called a V2 mom, and it's basically how we as a company write down our goals for the year. And so I have a personal V2 mom, which is my personal goals, and I look at it every month to see like, am I meeting the goals that I've set out for myself? And sometimes I'm doing well, sometimes I'm not, but it's always good to like have that once a month check in with myself of like, how am I doing on the things that I said I wanted to achieve? And some of those things are like have a date night once a week, or, learn to play a song on the guitar, or, eat more vegetables, that type of thing.
oh, we need to get you to play something for us on the guitar next time.
Oh no, I'm actually doing completely red on that goal. I'm not meeting that goal at all.
Well, at least you can now check off do a speaking conversation, like a public conversation.
Yes,
So at least you got
yes.
that done. And it's the beginning of the month. So like you have a while to go on that.
I do.
Yeah. Well, this has been really, really amazing, Andrea. Thank you so much for all your honesty and just like all the great like pieces of advice. I was like nugget after nugget after nugget. And thank you to everybody for like joining. Like the chat was just on fire. I want to make sure that as we go into the weekend or in general, I know we all have busy schedules, that you are able to reflect and take away something from today's conversation. There's so much good stuff. So put in the chat, what is one takeaway or one thing you want to remember from our conversation? It can be anything. Maybe it is around, how Andrea shared that like she doesn't feel comfortable speaking in public. And this morning she had that voice in her head being like, oh, like, what if I say something wrong? What if I'm not helpful enough? Maybe for you, it's reminding yourself to stand up for yourself, to do what to do when you're not valued by your company, to bounce back after you shy away from an opportunity, how to motivate yourself, how to motivate your team. So drop in the chat, what's a key takeaway or something that you really want to reflect on as we wrap up this conversation? Being able to acknowledge these diversity of styles, prioritizing, find what makes this person brilliant, really resonates with me. Great. The monthly goals, how a good manager should act and think like Andrea. Ooh, nice. Team motivation, personal V2 mom. No is an opportunity for us to get better. Yes, I love that. Ask how people want to be validated. These are really, really good. So many good nuggets. And thank you all for joining. Andrea, like again, thank you so much. This was such an insightful and deep conversation, which so thank you a lot.
Great. Thanks for having me, Shivani. I just am so amazed at what you do. Like, I could never do what you do, like, create a leadership program in your own business. And so I'm also in awe of you and what you do. So it's been a total pleasure getting to know you and having this conversation. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. You're a role model to me. So that means a lot coming from you. And for all of you, thank you again for joining us. If you really enjoyed this conversation and you're like, I want to develop a lot of these skills, I want to like really spend some time thinking about this, then I would love for you to come join us in Ascend's leadership program. It's a 6-week online leadership program for women where you'll spend time developing these practical skills and how do you get your ideas taken seriously? How do you overcome imposter syndrome, gaining confidence, being able to become the leader that you know you can be? While you get to learn with an awesome community of women. People love the group so much that they keep in touch even outside of the program. In fact, actually, from the members from Salesforce, they actually have now a Ascend Slack channel internally that they created so they can keep in touch with each other, which is really cool. And then a bunch of other companies have that too, so that you get to meet people from your company, but also outside of it. So if you're interested, you can definitely apply. We'll drop the link in the chat right now. It takes 5 minutes and we always sell out. So if you're interested, come apply, come join us. We already have women from Salesforce, Slack, Pandora, and a bunch of other companies. I am so excited to get started. And we will send out today's conversation recording of it early next week. So you will have it. Thank you again, Andrea. Thank you everyone for joining. Have an amazing weekend and stay safe and stay well, everyone. Take care.